Hello, and welcome to the Gary DeMar Show. Once again, I'm Joel McDurmon, sitting in for Gary DeMar, who's traveling. Should be back this afternoon, and we wish him safe travels. Tuning in today, we'd like to talk about a few things. I'm going to bring together a few disparate news items and tie them together, hopefully on a single theme, and hopefully lead in to talk about what we just received in the mail today at American Vision, my latest book, God versus Socialism, which includes a biblical critique of what I call the new social gospel. It contains several chapters on Jim Wallis, Tony Campolo, and Ronald Sider, all of whom are basically leftists who are using the Bible to support socialism. And it includes my former critique that was made available in an ebook, all available in print form right now, 245 pages at a wonderful price. Go to our web store at AmericanVision.com and look for that. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. Several news items came in this morning that had that kind of like pearls on the same thread, fit on the same theme. And of course, they're not really pearls as much as they are kind of unfortunate news. The first one was based on a WorldNet Daily exclusive article that talked about some of the events behind the Islamic attack at Fort Hood. Of course, we know about the Muslim gentleman, as he's talked about in the liberal media, who was having mental problems, allegedly, and went off and shot several people. And of course, in some of the underground media or some of the alternative news sources, it's coming out that there are many radical Muslim connections. This was an element of jihad and things like that. One of the things that just came out today that I thought was very interesting was some of the works, some of the teachings that have been circulating in the certain Muslim movements in America for many years now. One radical Islamic cleric, the article says, Saeed Shakir, told his audience that jihad is physically fighting the enemies of Islam to protect and advance the religion of Islam. This is jihad. And he gave this particular piece of advice. He said, Islam doesn't permit us to hijack airplanes filled with civilian people, Shakir told a Muslim audience. However, quote, if you hijack an airplane filled with the 82nd Airborne, that's something else. In other words, if you kill military men, if you kill a military target within the United States, that qualifies as good Islam, good jihad. And of course, the Nidal Malik Hassan, who carried out the shootings at Fort Hood last week, at least one of the witnesses there heard him cry, Allahu Akbar, Allah is great, as he shot the people he shot. This fits into the doctrine of radical Islamic jihad. This is not talked about in the mainstream media. They're doing everything they can to suppress this element of the story, under the guise of, one, it might cause a backlash against Muslim people in the U.S., and two, Islam is really a religion of peace, and this just represents, if anything, an aberration from that doctrine. The article here notes how much the mainstream media goes out of the way to portray these people as good, nice, wonderful citizens. Shakir, a black convert, has been portrayed as a moderate in the mainstream media, including the New York Times, which recently ran a positive profile of him. So we have this element in liberalism, and it's filtered all through the media, that makes this attempt to whitewash all of the radical elements out of religion. Of course, except for if a conservative, a Christian, does something wrong, then that, we have to have legislation to counteract that. And of course, we just recently had hate crimes legislation, which was referring all the way back to the Matthew Shepard incident many, many years ago, in which a young homosexual man was attacked by two boys, and I think he was right, he was dragged through the streets or something behind a truck, and of course it was a terrible crime, should have been punished. And just recently we had an update to the federal hate crimes laws that added homosexuality or sexual origin in there as available for prosecution from a hate crime. So if a conservative Christian does something, or if a conservative in general does something, then we have to have legislation against it. But if a radical Islamist does something, well, for some reason, the liberals find it necessary to protect these people as minorities, I don't know why. What is the point of being multicultural with all groups, including the most radical elements of Islam, and not being it against conservative Christians? Well, of course, we know what the reason is. It's an attack on conservative Christianity, and it has been from early on. The problem is that creates an impotence within the liberal movement when radical Islamists become a force and begin to carry out attacks like these. They don't really have an argument to stop it. They can say, well, this is not really Islam, but it doesn't matter what they say Islam is when there are guys like this fella in the mosques teaching groups of people that it's okay to hijack or attack military targets. And that's fine. It doesn't matter if there are women personnel. It doesn't matter if there are elderly personnel. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a military target, it's fair jihad. It's okay for an enlisted man who's a Muslim to attack other enlisted men in the name of jihad. It's okay to do that in their book. And liberalism really has no argument against this except to suppress it in the news and act like it didn't really happen. And of course, that's part of, number one, it's part of their double standard in applying hate crimes that they want so badly. And it's also part of their impotence as a secular movement. At least in some places, I saw a news story this morning that President Sarkozy in France has actually said burqas have no place in French society. If you're going to be a French liberated secular person, you cannot do that. And I don't know if they actually passed a law against it or not, but of course there was an outcry from certain sectors of the Islamic population, which is increasing in that country. But at least he took a stand as a liberal, although he is more of a conservative in that country, he's still liberal in general, and said we can't have this. It doesn't comport with liberalism. It would be nice, at least, if the liberals in this country would stand up and make a statement like that against radical Islam. They won't. They don't have a spine, except when it comes to their pet peeves. And this leads to a second news story that just came out this morning, and I got two versions of it. This has not been reported in any of the major news media outlets, none of the mainstream media, except one, and the one that did so watered it down it was not even funny. Allegedly, just a few days ago, in New York City, two Columbia University employees, one a professor and one kind of a helper in the theater department, were having a discussion in a bar, and the professor, who was egging on an argument about race and white privilege in this nation, and he's a black man, egged on this debate with a white woman. And the debate got heated, and it went further and further, and finally he just hauled off and punched her in the face right in front of everybody in this bar. And the report from witnesses says the punch was so loud that kitchen workers in the back heard it over all the noise. And the guy says, I was on my way over when he punched the girl, and she fell on top of me. Of course, they talk about how nice a girl she was. And another guy apparently stepped up to help her, and he punched, the professor punched him as well, knocked his glasses off his face. And this certain man who got punched said this: Mac was talking to us about white privilege and what I was doing about it. Apparently, I wasn't doing enough. The reporter goes on to note later down in the article that it'll be interesting if they do anything about hate crimes in regard to this. Unfortunately, I don't think he realizes that hate crimes only apply to felonies, and simple assault, which is done with your fists, not a weapon, is a misdemeanor. So the hate crime doesn't come into play here, at least not a federal hate crime. But it is interesting that the media has not carried this except for the underground, smaller news sources. The New York Times carried a post on it, completely whitewashed it. Well, we didn't get to talk about my new book today, which ties in the threads of how liberals use force, use taxation, use all kinds of beats of coercion to carry out their agenda in society. And that's what my book's all about. Maybe we'll get another new show Monday or so to talk about that now that it's in. Go to the store and look for the new book, God versus Socialism. Thank you very much.